everybody. Kay Crystal Griffith here, and welcome to Emotions, Wisdom, and Your Body. We are on our fourth emotion, but day 5. Let's go for confusion, right? Today, we're talking about anger. I know we might all have a little anger at some point in our lives, right? Now, here's your disclaimer as we're having our conversation. I am not a doctor. I'm a researcher. And I find random things in hidden places. And so just remember, this is for education, edification, and encouragement. So let's talk about anger. So anger is that strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, hostility. Imagine a 2-year-old and not giving them mac and cheese, or hiding their favorite lovey, or an adult who just got cut off in traffic, or sometimes an adult who has not had their coffee yet. Basically, anger is filling somebody with provocation. You're like provoking them. You're trying to get them to a place where basically you want them to explode. This is never a good plan, right? So is anger positive or negative? Well, this one might surprise you a little bit. It can be both. So how do we get anger as a positive? I know, it's a head scratcher. But anger is positive if it's useful. If it's driving someone appropriately to get something done, as far as what? So how would anger be a positive emotion that it's driving someone in the right direction? Well, let's think about Jesus for a second. So he had righteous anger in the temple. And when he walked into the temple, and I think it's in Matthew is the main place that it is. And when he walked in and he saw all these money changers in the Holy of Holies, in right outside there, and he saw the temple prostitutes, and he saw that they were selling these doves for more than they should have, and people were not able to sacrifice appropriately and properly during the season. He was pretty ticked off because they had made really that place of worship into a marketplace, and it wasn't appropriate where they were doing it. Now, in that moment, he flipped over tables, didn't he? That was definitely an anger outburst. I suspect his high blood pressure started in for a brief moment, and basically the idea was to start a revolutionary change, right? A change that would then create something different in the Holy of Holies. In fact, it took him actually officially doing that and doing away with us needing the Holy of Holies as far as in a temple. But that right then was dismissed as an outburst by basically a crazy lunatic, which is unfortunate because they were missing the point of why he was angry in that moment as righteous anger. So let's talk about where anger is tied into your body. So anger is tied to a basic survival mode. It's rooted in fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And that surge of anxiety, that feeling of powerless, we've been talking about those words, they result in a buildup that ends and culminates in anger. And it's not far from anger to actually murder. And so I was trying my hardest to find you that 7-step ladder to get you there. And like me, I can't find it. We saw it probably 20 years ago. It was really cool. But it's really only 7 steps to getting yourself from being uncomfortable to all the way to murder. It's kind of crazy how quick that can happen because how fast that anger takes over. And here's what happens when anger takes over. We are not just in downstairs brain. And if you missed that conversation, take a look at the 2 previous days, because we talked about upstairs, downstairs brain, and trust-based relational model based on Dr. Karen Purvis. And when you go to downstairs brain, you are dysregulated. And the longer you stay in dysregulation, the more these specific chemicals we're about to talk about begin to just infect your entire body. And that's why it's such a quick jump to get from anger to murder. And so let's talk about what we're really dealing with here. So the adrenal glands flood the body with stress hormones. You may have been stressed before, right? And those are chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, which we've talked about. The brain then shunts blood away. So it begins to push the blood away from the gut and towards the muscles in preparation for some physical exertion. So I want you to think in terms of, we live in the Rockies, and we used to live in a house that actually had bears pretty often. in the trees outside. And it was kind of crazy. And so we would always not go out at night because you never know what was going to be in the yard. So if you went outside to maybe get something out of the car that you left in there and you encounter something special out there, maybe a coyote, maybe the bear, maybe a variety of things, right? So what happens immediately? Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your perspiration increases, right? And then your body temperature rises, your skin perspires. I mean, but what happens to your mind? Your mind is like sharp, super focused, because we've gone into that release of adrenaline. And at that point, your body is then going, I need to think about an exit plan here: fight, flight, freeze, or faint. So in that moment, if we're encountering a bear, we could find the biggest stick and fight. And then once we fight, then everything calms back down and it exits the system. We could run. If you can run faster than a bear, go for it. Not sure that's the best idea. Or we can freeze in fear. It's almost like a paralysis happens. Or we can faint, to where you have such a quick change in your blood pressure and a couple of other things happen in there that basically your body can't handle that motion in that moment and you pass out. So now most people would tell you if you did encounter a bear, you should get real low and cover your head and your neck. But so if you think through each of those exit plans, like your brain is processing those like a million miles a minute, right? Or a second, I should probably say. And once you figure out your exit plan and you execute it and you're out then of danger, so then the bear realizes you're nothing and you don't have a picnic lunch and they go off on their way, then your body can come back to normal, right? So this is super important to understand about PTSD. And I recently came upon this theory probably about 2 years ago, and it makes so much sense because when you have encountered PTSD, and we're not going to actually address PTSD as an emotion itself because it's such a combination of emotions. So I'm going to sprinkle it through many of our talks. But in PTSD, you are rooted in fight, flight, freeze, or faint. Okay. So I want you to think in terms of a lot of our military members for a second. Okay. They stay at a high alert. So if we're talking about a scale of 1 to 10, they're staying at a level 8 all the time, especially while they're overseas and they're in more high intensity situations and they never know what's coming around the corner, literally. So they're always rooted in that adrenaline. So then they come back home and here's what's happened. Remember that exit plan that I just mentioned? Like once the bear leaves, you know you're safe and your body can, right, calm down. Those guys, and when I say guys, I mean guys and girls. I'm from New York at one point, so everybody's guys. Those guys in the military, when they come back in that situation from PTSD, they never get that calm because their situation has never discharged. So it is still actually implanted into their central nervous system. That's where fight, flight, or freeze and faint stem from. And so because of that central nervous system issue, they have to be able to discharge that energy, that exit plan that I'm calling it, because otherwise it just stays rooted in there. And that's a big trauma for them. And so if you think also about families, I read 3 or 4 stories actually today in a couple of groups I'm attached to, that these people have had horrible childhoods in which they were abused in a variety of ways, especially at night. And in those situations, there was always that fight, flight, or freeze because they never knew what was going to happen in the night, right? So now they have PTSD from that. And so now they're grown up and they still have to sleep with a light on. They still have to sleep with a door that has to lock. They still have to be able to sleep maybe even separate from their spouse because they can't handle anybody else being that close to them in the middle of the night. So that's, again, that exit plan from that PTSD situation where they encountered at young ages. And so it's super important that we figure out a way to be able to exit those PTSD plans from their bodies. Now, I will tell you, one of the things that I offer is an inner healing type of emotional trauma work. And that in itself has done some wonders with people and clients that I've worked with for PTSD. There's also what's called EMDR, There's also something called EFT, which is emotional freedom tapping technique, and that's tapping different places on the face and on the body. It's amazing what that does. I actually taught it to one of my clients who had surgery, and when she woke up out of recovery, the nurse was asking her why she was tapping her hand, and she didn't even realize she was doing it. She goes, "Huh, I must have been in pain." So it's pretty cool how quickly we can give you tools for you to learn some of those techniques. So when you get into fight, flight, or freeze or faint, that you can begin to calm your body down and you can have that exit plan, right? And get it out of your system. So a couple of other things that anger does is not just that high blood pressure, but also a headache. Digestive problems, back to those ulcers, abdominal pain itself, insomnia, depression, skin problems such as eczema, even a stroke. And I'm going to throw one more out at you called functional neurological disorder. And this is a disorder that used to have an old name called conversion disorder. And they used to think it was just all psychological. And now they know better. But it literally is when your brain flips a switch because of trauma, whether that be physical trauma from illness, diagnosis, reaction to a medication or something like that, or actually psychological trauma. And so your brain flips a switch and all of a sudden you're having what's called non-epileptic seizures, or you're losing feeling in your legs or your arms, or you're losing sight in your eye. I mean, it is crazy what your brain can do to your body. And your brain, from a computer standpoint, is really your processing board. And when that starts to fry, we're in big trouble. Because you can't really go in and just replace, a type of gadget on the motherboard. You actually have to figure out ways to reprocess the information so your brain will start to function better. So there's a whole lot to anger that people hadn't even thought about. They think it's just like being upset because your coffee spilled. It really, there's a whole lot physiologically to anger. And so there are some people that will tell you there is no such thing as anger. When you're feeling what you're feeling is really fear, hurt, or frustration. Now, I will tell you, I agree with that to a point. But the fact is, though that fear, that hurt, the frustration begins to build. It builds in anxiety, it builds in depression, it builds in annoyance, and it begins to chew at you from the inside out. And so I do think there is such a thing as anger. I think that is something that you need to work on because it can harm your body physiologically. So anger affects your thoughts and your feelings. Anger can cause brain fog. A lot of people think that's just a fatigue thing. When you're so angry and that's all you're mulling about, and that could be from bitterness, that could be from offense, that could be from unforgiveness, a variety of things. And we'll get into all those at other times. But the idea is that is what you're constantly thinking about. And you lose sight of what somebody is saying to you, or you lose sight of what you need to get accomplished in the next 10 minutes because you're off being upset, right? And that anger is just fueling the fire within you, getting you closer and closer off the track of where you really need to be. So a lot of people will try to escape their anger. A lot of people will try to nullify it. Never works. Feelings buried alive never die. They don't. And the crazy thing is, I said that before I realized there was a book by that title. And then I read the book. It was a really good book. So feelings buried alive never die, folks. They will find a way out. They will. They will not hide. They will seep into you and they will come out from really a sharp tone and anger, sleeping too much, mollifying your brain there with just binge watching any kind of TV program. We had somebody talk today, do not watch the show because 39 hours later, you will come out of the binge watching coma. We're like, okay, make a note. Do not watch that show. So, oftentimes with this quarantine, we do want to get out of our own head because we're looking at the same four walls. So how do we do that in a way that is more productive for ourselves? I'm just going to encourage you, take a walk around the block, folks. The more that you can even just get out and walk in your own yard to get some good vitamin C, it is going to help you because physical exercise is going to help you with your anger. It's going to be an outlet that gets that frustration and that tension out of your body. So anger can hijack your ability to not only think clearly, but as a result, you're not thinking clearly, you're not making good decisions. You're making poor decisions and poor judgment in those decisions. And let's just say, for example, you're angry that you haven't found the person you're going to marry. I know people get angry about this. It's quite interesting to watch this unfold sometimes. And they're so angry that that person hasn't come, that now they're bent on finding somebody. And they will, not the right person. And they're probably going to end up in a divorce or an abusive situation, but they're really looking for a rescuer. And as I had somebody just tell me this week, here's the thing: when you go looking for a rescuer, you're going to find an oppressor. And this is not a good plan, folks. So to really take charge of your life and your health, your emotions, it's super important that you're processing them, because you don't want to make a situation out of desperation. You want to make a decision out of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And that knowledge is the application of that understanding and that wisdom that you've heard and learned about. And so it's just even more important to surround yourself with godly, wise counsel who you're seeing the fruit in their lives of applying that wisdom, because then you can begin to see how they deal with anger, or they deal with a situation that kind of makes somebody flare. And there's going to be times that you're going to see that and they're going to walk away and not have a moment's reaction to it. And you're going to be like, how did that just happen? Because I'm mad for them. And that's the cool thing about walking in that peace that overwhelms the chaos around you too. And so the more that you practice that, the more that you walk in it, the better you're going to get. So can you have too much anger? Oh, yeah. Anger creates an energy surge. And when that energy surges, then the chemicals like adrenaline and epinephrine and cortisol, they enter your bloodstream, your heart rate increases, your blood flow increases, your muscles are all tensed up. People begin to throw things, people begin to sling things down, all trying to find a release out of the system, just like we talked about, right? And anger also compromises your immune system. You're starting to get a pattern here that all these emotions affect your immune system. So we need to be processing them, right? So bottled up anger often turns into depression and anxiety, which we've talked about before. Some people vent their bottled anger at innocent parties. That could be children or pets. And typically those are the most vulnerable, or their spouses, because they are in contained places. And oftentimes they don't get an opportunity to tell anybody else, especially the children and pets. So I just want to encourage you guys to really understand where this anger comes from. There are no excuses for not being responsible and accountable for the choice to hold that bottled anger. And so I really want to speak to the families who may be on the receiving end of that bottled anger. And it is very important that you seek safety. This will not change until they want it to change. You are not their savior. You cannot pray this through. You cannot solve this problem. They cannot go to some kind of mentorship program. They have got to get intense help for that anger that has been bottled up for so long, and especially if there's PTSD roots to it. So you really want to seek out, not you for them, but they need to be accountable for their own healing, their own health, and they need to seek out a counselor who works with PTSD and can walk them through some of those specialized programs. But you can't do that for them. So the more that you want that for them and the more that you're willing to do it, then they want it for themselves, is called codependency. And so that's kind of like seeing somebody with an addiction, because anger, I think, can be an addiction, to be honest. They're so used to having that rise of adrenaline that they get a little addicted to it, I think. And so again, I'm not a doctor. But this is what I've seen in the clients that I've worked with, as well as the research that I've done. And so, when there's an addiction and you want them to get sober more than they want to get sober, that's codependency. That's what we're talking about there. And you can't walk in that, because it's only harming your health. You cannot be the rescuer. They have to do it for themselves. And it may be the hardest decision you ever make, to just lay them on the altar and say, you know what? I would love to continue this relationship, but here are the boundaries around it. And you begin to understand and learn boundaries around anger when it's coming directed towards you, when it's a situation where you are not in a safe situation, or your children are not in a safe situation, or even your pets are not in a safe situation. But you are worthy of respect. You are worthy of honor. You are worthy to be cherished because you are worthy because you exist, not because somebody has told you anymore that there's a label that makes you worthy. No, you are worthy of those things to be cherished and treasured as a masterpiece because you exist. And so you are worthy to get help, and you are worthy to seek safety. Okay, guys? So there's my little soapbox for that one. So let's just remember that long-term strategies are that anger management piece, but they have to seek it for themselves. Or if that's you, if I'm talking to someone who has a lot of anger, you have to seek it for yourself, because no one can solve this for you. And so that could include some regular exercise where you're just deliberate. You get up, you do it, whether if that's 5 a.m. or 5 p.m., but you are consistently getting that energy out of your system. You're learning relaxation techniques, and you're learning counseling. Tapping is a fantastic help for really getting through a lot of the emotions that we have talked about. Physical exertion burns up the stress chemicals. It also boosts production of mood regulating neurotransmitters in the brain, including those endorphins. It's also finding the root of that anger. Sometimes, again, you might have inherited because your parents did something, now you're doing something, right? You never think that you're going to say the same things that your parents say until the first time they come out of your mouth, and you're like, oh, that was my mom. And then you kind of catch yourself, and you're like, oh, was that a good thing or a bad thing? So you have to think about it. Those are always entertaining moments. But really processing that trauma to discharge the emotional aspect allows you to have a memory of something traumatic, but without any physical rise within your body. And that's really what you're looking for, to where you can talk about a situation that you have been strangled and you have no rise. I can tell you that today. I was strangled and I have no rise to it. I can tell you that right now. Did you see me get upset? Did you see something move? Did you see my eyes change? Nope. I can talk about it all day long. And what was done to me was wrong. But I can talk about it today. And I can help somebody else have an impact in their life to say, hey, that was not okay. And I wish somebody had been around to tell me to go get help then. And I didn't have that. And so I'd love to be that for you. And so I'm not making the decision for them, but I'm allowing them a resource that they have to access if they needed it. So I just want to encourage you to remember what the opposite of anger is. It's tranquility. How do you walk in that peace that we've been talking about? How do you walk in self-control? How do you walk in patience? How do you walk in rest? You know, we often think rest is just about sleep. It's so much more than that. It's so cool. When you finally realize what rest really is and what God has for you as rest, man, it's a whole nother ball of wax. All right, so what are our verses today? I have several for you. The first one is James 1:18. James 1:18. Remember, put your name in there as a personalization. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So then all those chemicals are not running amok in your body, right? That was Crystal's version of it at it. Proverbs 29:11. Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise, there's our wisdom word, bring calm in the end. Remember, if you get dysregulated, now you're kind of pressing everybody's buttons, and guess what's going to happen? If they don't know to stay regulated, they're about to get dysregulated. And that's how all those bar fights happen. I wouldn't know. I haven't been in one, but I'm just saying. Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away all wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So you go to get your coffee in the morning and you come around the corner and you're just like, what just happened? I just woke up. All right. So a harsh word stirs up anger. And so we want to come in gentle. Colossians 3:8. But now you must rid yourself of all these things: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. That anger, rage, malice, those are 3 of those 7 steps. I can tell you that. So you definitely want to pay attention to those. And our last verse is Psalm 37, 8-9. Refrain from anger, turn from wrath. Do not fret. It only leads to evil. And for those who are evil, they will be destroyed. But those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. So again, how do we use all this amazing information we just learned about anger, right? Remember, wisdom is the hearing, the understanding, and the application. And so I encourage you to ask the Lord these couple of questions. How has this emotion of anger been showing up in your life? Has it been negative? Has it been positive? Was there some righteous anger in there if it was positive? And why has it been acting positive or negative in your life? Third question, how can you transform anger? By wisdom, by those verses that we just talked about, by turning away from wrath, by working on physical education, by choosing some of the anger management techniques and tips that I just gave you, right? How can you use that to be wise? Can you get to the root of why you're angry? So take the scripture, add your name, personalize it. He wrote it just for you. So don't worry, I'll remember to post this in our chat. And I would love for you to go live, share what you thought was the most unexpected thing that you heard about anger tonight. Tomorrow's word is fear, which leads to all of the emotions that we have discussed so far. And I have a little story to share with you. It's pretty cool. So come back tomorrow. We'll talk about fear. Until then, you guys have a blessed night and take care. And I will remember to turn this off this time. Guys, take care. Bye-bye.